Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about another fantastic, famous Greek city-state in ancient Greece, the city-state of Athens. Now, Athens was the one Greek city-state that became enough power and prestige to become a rival of the great city-state of Sparta, which we've already talked about. Athens also achieved great heights of glory. They did it in a completely different way than the Spartans did. The Athenians were a much more open society and were very much into well-rounded education and into trade and promoting your trade and your culture beyond your city. And so they were very much more progressive than the Spartans were, and yet they were very, very successful. So let's talk a little bit about the city-state of Athens. So Athens, of course, today is the capital city of Greece, of the modern-day city of Greece. And it's one of those few cities that you can go in and be right there, shoulder to shoulder, modern stores right next to very ancient buildings that could be 2,000 to 2,500 years old. It's one of those cities where, very similar to like Rome, where one building could be a modern building and the next building right next door could be one of ancient construction. So you get to this very interesting dichotomy of the ancient and the modern in modern-day Athens, built where the ancient great Greek city-state of Athens was built. Citizenship in Athens was a birthright. If you were born in Athens, you became a citizen. In the year 507 BC, the Athenians develop what in the historians believe in the Western civilization, the very first constitution. Now, a constitution, what is that? Well, a constitution is a document that, and a code of law of rights and privileges that citizens have in the relationship to the government. And the Constitution of Athens is considered the first constitution to be written down and codified in the ancient world. And it served Athens for many years. 507 BC, well over 2,500 years ago as we speak. In the Constitution, the primary government driver was the assembly. And the assembly in Athens basically allowed all men who had been born in Athens to participate. And so you could have many hundreds of people come to the assembly. And if you were a member of the assembly, you were granted equality. All right, all of the citizens were basically looked at as equals and treated such. One of the main concepts of allowing people to come and to voice their opinions and to put them out in the public square was the guaranteed right of free speech. It's very interesting that that was codified in the Athenian Constitution. In our own United States Constitution, many of you have probably read and have been made aware of throughout your history classes that our senators and congresspeople in the House of Representatives are given complete immunity to what they say as congressmen and senators. They have the right to speak their mind. They represent us, all right, in our government. And as such, we give them freedom of speech like everybody else, but especially when they're doing their duties as a congressman and a senator. Same, if you went and you had an opinion that wasn't very popular at the assembly, you still had the right to speak it. Now, they had a mechanism built into their constitution called ostracism. And ostracism was a system that was developed and put into the Athenian constitution that protected the people of Athens from unruly or politicians who might try to do them harm or limit their rights. And if we, as Athenians, had an undesirable politician, ostracism was a way to remove them from power. The closest thing that we would have in a modern-day government, a constitutional government like we have here in the United States, would be impeachment. But ostracism worked this way. Everybody in the ancient world in Greece used pottery or ceramic, pots, plates, utensils. And so when they would get broken, dropped, or just wear out and crack, then there were always pieces of pottery lying around. And pieces of pottery in Athens were known as ostracons. So these pottery shards were kept, and that is what they would use in this process of ostracism. Ostracism comes from the word ostracon. And if a politician got unruly and was constantly making trouble for other citizens and other politicians, they would have this ostracism vote. If an undesirable politician had his name written on 6,000 pieces of broken pottery from the city, they then could be kicked out of the city for up to 10 years. And so it was a moderating policy to keep politicians from trying to usurp too much power, to keep politicians from trying to take the rights away from their citizens. Athens gives you an idea how big this city was by now. 6,000 people wasn't a tremendous amount. When I say people, generally grown men. But if you had 6,000, your name appeared, and you were a member of the assembly, and your name appeared on 6,000 pieces as they pulled them out and read your name. If your name got read 6,000 times, you didn't get to live in the city for at least 10 years. So ostracism was their mechanism to protect themselves from unruly assembly members. Athenians were huge into education. They began their education for their students at 7 years old. And at 7 years old, they went to school, and they went to school for the next 11 years. At age 18, they would graduate. In that period of time, they were taught math. They specialized in geometry. When you think about some of the great mathematicians that we even study today in our own math classes here in high school, they trace their beginnings back to the Greeks. How many of you remember the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared on a right triangle. Well, that comes from Pythagoras, who was a Greek educated mathematician. Use that just as one example. The first geometry book that was ever written was written by another Greek mathematician whose name was Euclid. So math was very important in Athenian education. The ability to draw, all right, to create landscapes, buildings, architecture, very much an important part of their culture. Music was also very important in Athens. And so music was a part of their education. Rhetoric. And what is rhetoric? Rhetoric is the ability to speak publicly. If we're going to allow people to come and be a part of the assembly and allow men to participate and to give them free speech, then we want articulate, well-spoken men to be able to put their ideas and their opinions into the public square. So rhetoric, the art of public speaking, highly important in Athens. And of course, physical fitness. Gym classes in the afternoon were always part of the Athenian education process. At 18, once you graduated from school, you then went into military training, and that was a 2-year process. And at the beginning of your military training, all young men in Athens would go to the temple of Zeus and take what is known as the Zeus Temple Oath. And I want to take a little bit of time to go through the Zeus Temple Oath, because I think it gives us a window into what Athenian culture was all about. Picture yourself, you're 18 years old, a young man. You've been brought up in Athens. You've been educated. And now it's your time to go and get your 2 years of military service in. You're going to go with your father, all right? The father would take his 18-year-old son. They would go to the temple of Zeus, the most holy spot in all of Greece. And in front of the massive statue of Zeus that I have right over here, that is a artist's rendition. Here's the statue of Zeus in his temple. Of course, considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. Unfortunately, it does not stand anymore. It's been destroyed. But it was one of the wonders of the ancient world. You can only imagine the impact that that great statue of ivory and gold had on both father and son. So, you would go as an 18-year-old young man, and you would go stand in front of the Zeus statue. And your father would be by your side. And the Zeus priest would then make you recite and take upon yourself an oath and a promise. And I've listed the key points of this. The number one thing that a young man would always vow to do was never to dishonor his weapon. Now that weapon most likely would be a sword. And what does that mean, not dishonor the weapon? You're never going to use the weapon that you have been that you're going to be trained in to defend your city-state and to defend your culture. You're never going to use it to commit crime. You are never going to go out and be overtly violent with your weapon to your fellow citizenry. So you will never dishonor your weapon. The next one is, you will never desert your comrade. The man that's going to be, another young man would be taking the same oath, and he'd be standing shoulder to shoulder by you, all right, in times of struggle, in times of defending your city, or in times of battle. You take an oath that you will never desert the man by your side, your comrade. You make another huge promise. You promise to hand over the land, the fatherland, if you will, better than before. You're taking an oath that over the course of your life, you're going to conduct your life in such a way, raise your family in such a way, that your city-state and the region that you have lived in will be better because you were there. That's a huge promise that each young man would make. The letter E here. They took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of Athens. It's very similar to anybody who holds public office in the United States government. They put their hand on a Bible, and they will raise their other hand to the square, and they will repeat an oath. And the major part of that oath is, I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from enemies, both foreign and domestic. So help me God. Now, where does that come from? That's a direct translation, okay, of culture from ancient Greece to modern America. It is nothing more than a modern-day version of what young men did in front of Zeus in ancient Athens 2,500 years ago, to protect and defend the Constitution, the codification of your rights as an equal citizen. And then lastly, they vow to always honor their religion and their religion's temples. And in Athens, the most famous religious temple, and it does still stand today, it is a world-famous landmark to the beauty of Athenian architecture, and it stands as a testimony of their religious commitment to their religious beliefs and to their goddess Athena. It is known simply as the Parthenon. The Parthenon, the building of the Parthenon began all the way back at 447 years BC. The Parthenon still stands today on top of the Acropolis, the hill right in the middle of Athens. You can still go and see it, even though it's been bruised and battered over 2,500 years. There have been battles fought in front of it. You can see bullet holes or bullet scars in the marble. You can see where cannonballs have hit it. It still stands because it was that well built. One of the unique architectural techniques that the Athenians practiced was known as entasis. And it's an architectural technique that makes curved lines look straight. I'm going to show you a picture here on the wall of the Parthenon. Here's the Parthenon as it stands today on the Athenian Acropolis. As you notice, you look at the pockmarks and the scarring on the marble columns and the facade here. But as you look at it, it looks square. There are no straight lines in the Parthenon. The Parthenon is one of the classic examples in both the ancient and modern world of the architectural technique of entasis. Everything in the Parthenon, all the lines have a slight curve to them, but you would never notice to the naked eye because of their ability to practice the architectural strategy of entasis. But the Parthenon, when it was all done before the course of 2,500 years and military campaigns around the area, inside of it there was the statue of the patron goddess of Athens, Athena, all right, the goddess of wisdom and the arts. And we here in America, we have copied, all right, that cultural icon, and we have made monuments to very important men in our republic. Here's a couple of examples. All right, look at the Parthenon. Well, here we are copying Greek architecture here in front of the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. Look at the facade of the White House with the columns, all right, and this facade is very much trace it back to the ancient Greeks. But the main one I want to talk to you about is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Here's a small picture of the facade of the Lincoln Memorial. It's square, it's boxed, just like the Parthenon with the pillars. And just as the Parthenon, towards the back had a beautiful statue of Athena. You look here in the dusk as the inner chamber of the Lincoln Memorial is lit. There is Lincoln sitting on his throne. Here's a picture of Lincoln inside the Lincoln Memorial during daytime, where you can see it much better. And of course, we simply refer to it as the Lincoln Memorial, but actually look above here and it says, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Classic example of how we have copied from the ancient Greeks their architectural strategies. And the Lincoln Memorial is a replica, to the best of our ability, to the ancient Parthenon, which was a temple to the goddess of Athena in the ancient city-state of Athens. So Athens would have been one of the most progressive ancient cities ever constructed. It gives us the first constitution. It gives us citizenship birthright. Well, just as we talk about in the United States, if you're born in the United States, according to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, you are a citizen. The right to self-government, self-representation in the assembly, equality, free speech. Of course, like we mentioned, they had mechanisms to protect themselves. Education beginning at 7. Many of these courses are what you are taking now, trying to create a well-rounded young adult who will go out and make a life for themselves. Military training, mandatory at 18. And prior to that, you take the Zeus Temple Oath with your father, and then these 5 promises, amazing. And this, of course, this oath was taken by young men in front of their fathers, who I'm sure had taken the oath themselves over 2,500 years ago. Athens, a fantastic city-state in ancient Greece, and a great template for what we have in the United States of America 2,500 years later.